We hold these truths to be self-evident.
That all men are created equal,
endowed by their Creator
with certain unalienable rights.
That among these are life,
liberty, and the
pursuit
pursuit
of
of happiness.
Hi, my name is Lexi Underwood. I just want to thank everybody so much for joining me today. Today we will be talking about Black Lives Matter and the climate of racism in America. I'm so incredibly excited about my panel of guests today. Today joining us and our voices of the Gen Z panel, we have author, singer, songwriter, and autism advocate, Brian Peete. We have youth advocate from Maryland, Nate Tinbite. We have youth advocate from LA, Davion Pilgrim. We have LA Students Deserve, Sarah Djato. We have social media influencer and student of the University of California, Berkeley, Ava Phillippe. From Black Lives Matter Youth Vanguard, we have Thandiwe Abdullah. We have youth activist and aspiring journalist, Naomi Wadler. Actor and influencer, Stevonte Hart. Actor and influencer, Jade Pettyjohn. Actor and influencer, Jahi Winston. Activist and aspiring journalist, Naomi Wadler. Serving as our mentors and subject matter experts for this conversation, we have Dr. Alfiee Breland-Noble, our mental health expert. We have Meagan, actor and activist. And we have Logan Browning, actor and activist as well. So many of us saw the footage of George Floyd, or we at least heard about what had happened to him. Since then, we have heard multiple incidents of Black people being hung, and we just recently saw footage of Rayshard Brooks being shot to death. How are you all processing these images and stories? Have you experienced some form of mental health trauma as a result of what we're processing right now? And what's the conversation like being held within your own household and in your peer group? What's the conversation amongst your friends?
This incident is traumatizing to all of us. And one thing that really hits home for me is that I recognize that not only am I part of a statistic that it's victims to this type of police violence, but that George Floyd's incident could be me, could be my brother, could be my dad, Brianna could be my mom. And that's really what's sad about what's happening today. It's not just this one police killing that really symbolizes what is happening to the Blacks. The whole system of oppression against African Americans and people of color. And what's happening in my household is, there are frank discussions on how to handle being around police officers, where my mom is telling me basically do everything that they say because she doesn't want me to be on that TV screen like we see so many others. And so the conversation is hard. The trauma is real. And many of us in every household should be sad, but we should also be fired up to really call on our legislators to do something, because that's how we're going to change this. We've done that with marches and protests, and never again should what happened to George Floyd happen to anybody else.
When I was 4 years old, that was when Trayvon Martin was shot. So really as old as I can remember, racially charged violence, specifically involving the police, has been something that I've grown up around. And I remember I did see the footage of George Floyd, and at that very moment, I wasn't as shocked as I felt I should have been, because this is something that's been happening as long as I can remember, and I'm sure as long as a lot of you guys can remember. And so the numbness and the fact that this situation was so mundane to me, I think is what kind of scared me into being more aware of what's going on. And talking about racially charged violence is something that I'm very comfortable with, but as a 13-year-old, that's not something that is very typical of people in my age group.
The week that George Floyd was murdered, I legit went into a full-on depression, the kind where you're just why am I here? I don't understand what it's all for. And even, it's even since George Floyd's murder, there's been a lot more killings, and so I think the biggest thing for me is that I had to rearrange my thinking and get back to the bottom line is it's about taking action. It's about creating change. It's about coming together. It's about healing together. And it's about, what can we do to change things? And I think one of the biggest things is just not letting up, and really being consistent about making change.
Today, I watched footage from the press conference that Rayshard Brooks' family did. And a quote was from his cousin. And his cousin was talking about the fact that, life shouldn't be this complicated. Life shouldn't be where we have to feel some type of way every time we see a police officer, every time we see somebody that, is a different color.
My dad, to answer your question, like he asked me the question, because we've been having quite a few conversations surrounding everything that's been going on. And we were talking about the conversation of defunding the police. And I said, I can say in my 16 years, I've never seen a police officer and felt any kind of sense of safety or comfort in the presence of a police officer. And he said, well, what was your first experience with a police officer? Because usually that has something to do with how you analyze the police. And I said, I think it was the knowledge and the innate knowledge that the police have never added any sense of comfort or safety for people who look like me. And they have, in a sense, always taken away the comfort and the safety from our communities. And not only do I not feel safe around the police, I fear an immediate fear for my life. And that's always been what it is.
And I also want to pass this question over to Dr. Alfiee. What advice do you have on how to process this range of emotions that we're feeling?
So I would say part of it is doing exactly what each one of you is doing, and that is being honest and naming your feelings. People take that for granted, I think, the fact that just naming and stating what you're feeling. So as Ms. Good talked about, the feelings associated with depression, it's important to know what those are, right? It's important to recognize signs and symptoms so that you know what you're dealing with, because you can't address a problem if you don't name the problem, right? And I think for those of us who are of color in our communities, mental health is not something that we typically talk about. It's certainly with, right? So what are we taught? Often, not always. We're often taught if you pray, it'll go away. So I think in addition to naming what we are experiencing, we want to recognize that everybody can't be out in the fight in the same way all the time. There's a time and a place for maybe half of us to go be out in the street while the rest of us are trying to recuperate and feel better. There's a time where we switch places. And so I think it is important to recognize there's something that each of us can contribute. We don't all have to contribute in the same way. It's important for us to know what these signs and symptoms are, and then we have to take the time to do what we call active coping. I implore my young people, it is important that you're informed, but we cannot sit and watch the loop over and over and over of what is happening to our brothers and sisters, because it doesn't help us. It hurts, right? And the same way that you can get PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, from experiencing something, you can develop those same symptoms from watching. So knowing these kinds of things and recognizing that we have to protect our mental health like we do our physical health, and whatever we have to do that. Some people color. I'm an avid meditator. Everybody has something. Some of you, you all are all artists, and you have these wonderful gifts and talents. To use those talents to take care of yourself. So
you help us, we help them. Compassion is ingrained in love. That's the answer, but we answer to the opposite direction of the cause. Black bodies, they don't care. You see me unaware of what's on my mind. Black bodies, oh, I need you to see me, yeah. I got some good change in my heart. That's where change gotta start. That's where change gotta start.